I'm Leah from Connected AU, and welcome to another author chat for Connected AU's book club. Today, we are so fortunate to be speaking with the very talented Carol Lefevre about her latest book, Bloomer. Carol is one of those writers whose work stays with you long after you've put the book down. With a background in journalism and a PhD in creative writing, she's written award-winning novels, essays, and memoirs that look candidly but beautifully at identity, memory, aging, and the quiet moments that shape a life. Her latest book, Bloomer, goes against the usual narrative of aging. We are invited to reimagine what growing older can look like, with ongoing learning, discovery, and joy. Carol also raises critical issues around ageism, something that is so deeply embedded in our culture, from anti-aging products to dismissive stereotypes. We are challenged to push back against that, to reclaim the word old, and to see the beauty and value in later life. If anybody has a question for Carol or a comment, please just type your name into the chat. I'll keep an eye on it. You're welcome to ask a question yourself, or you just type your name in and I can ask for you. Carol, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
It's my great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for reading Bloomer and inviting me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I think you write with such honesty about the reality of aging. You also wrote in this book about, the grief of losing friends and loved ones, your cancer diagnosis, and the complexity of losing your mother. But I think there's still a lot of hope in your words, about connection, purpose, what it means to keep blooming at every stage of life. And it feels, incredibly personal, but very universal. Was it hard to decide how much of yourself to share in this?
It was actually, I think Bloomer began as a series of essays about aging, and two or three of them were published online in the conversation, and they were more essayistic. They were a bit personal, but didn't go deep.
Mm,
Um, and then when I was trying to collect them together into the book, I had some feedback on what I'd already written, and I was advised that um, I would be better off incorporating a memoir, cushioning all of the essays in a kind of in memoir, and that would make it much more readable for people. So when I sort of came back and looked at what I had, and I realized that what I needed was a structure, because real life's really messy. There's hard to see the beginnings and ends of things. It just goes on and on.
mhm.
And so I needed to find a way that readers, when they open a book, can feel kind of held in the book. They can recognize a structure that they're going to feel secure and held, and know that this has got some shape. It's not just a mess of ideas.
Right.
And luckily for me, because my birthday's on the 1st of January, I was struck with the idea that this was a good plan to make it over the course of a year. So starting from the 1st of January to the end of the year.
Yeah.
And my 70th year was coming up. So
Mhm.
this was raising lots of questions in my mind. I hadn't ever planned to write about my mother's death. Um,
Mhm.
it felt, just so close. I didn't think I'd ever write anything about it. But then, of course, once I decided on this structure for the book where it covered that year, and she died like a fortnight into my
Yeah.
70th birthday, there was no way
You couldn't.
around that. I just had to. So I sat down and thought, right, okay, well, this is what we have to do. And it just came out the way I felt, really.
Yeah. Amazing. Did you write this with a universal audience in mind? Were you hoping it would resonate with both younger and older readers alike?
I think at first I was really writing it for myself, but as I went along and began to sort of question who I'd been as a young woman, how I'd been as a young woman,
Mm.
how I'd felt about all of these things when I was younger, I did begin to hope that it would resonate with younger readers. Um, and I'd noticed that there were a couple of books around about aging, but they'd been written by women, usually in their 40s, coming up to 50. So they were facing that sort of age of the menopause and that sort of thing, which is a different situation.
Yeah.
There are different questions that you ask yourself at that age. And I sort of noticed that there was no one writing at my stage of the game
Yeah.
and writing about the questions that I was asking myself.
Mm.
So, yeah, I think between us all as women, we could cover all the years, but we just haven't been covering these later years very much.
No, you're right. And I think I was surprised. So I'm in my early 40s with how much the book resonated with me and what a big chord it struck with me, because I'm not at that stage yet. Um, so I think you did a great job, even if it was, unconsciously, of
Mm,
resonating with a younger audience as well. And you're right, there is so much. I think there's lots of movies about sort of, the midlife age transition and menopause and, for men,
mm,
midlife crisis, but there isn't much about the next stage in life. So that was the other thing I really adored about this book was it was something kind of not new because everybody knows that aging is going to happen, but it was just lovely to have such raw honesty and it was also beautiful. There was hope in there and yeah. Um, and we just
Well,
so
I'm an optimist always,
yeah,
so I think there's always going to be hope in
yeah,
there for
yeah.
me. Yeah.
It's great. And a central theme is pushing back against ageism.
Mm.
Why do you think ageism is so persistent in our culture? And how do we shift that narrative? I know books like
Mm.
this are certainly a step in the right direction.
Uh, I mean, I don't know. Look, I look back to when I was a child, and I spent periods of time when I lived with my grandparents, both
Mm,
sets of grandparents, for various reasons, going to school and that sort of thing. My parents were living way out in the outback at one point, and I needed to live with grandparents. And it felt like a natural situation to have a household that was composed of people of various ages. And it feels to me, and it's now that there was more respect for older
mm,
people. Um, they weren't, they weren't denigrated. They didn't complain about their aging. They just sort of got on with it.
yeah.
It seems to have it seems to have changed with, I don't know, what has it changed with? Maybe the growth of the aged care industry, the growth of the situation where both partners in a marriage need to go out to work, and so there's no one at home. Maybe once upon a time, an older member of the family might have lived with their children, with younger people, and now that seems to be not so often possible.
Mm,
But we certainly entered an age where to grow old has become rather demoralising, and yet people are doing it all the time. And ageism is one of those things. It's like it's almost acceptable. We almost don't notice it, or we almost embrace it. With all the so during the 1980s, there was the growth also of the beauty industry with its anti-aging products.
yeah.
And so we just take those for granted now. We read something that's anti-aging on a supermarket shelf, and we don't say, well, this is ridiculous. This can't be. It's not true. It's really not going to be anti-aging.
Yeah.
Um, and yet ageism is deeply embedded in our society, and it's been proved by loads of studies, and one very big important one, which I think covered 57 countries and 87,000 people, and showed that
Mm,
ageism, when we turn it against ourselves and we internalize it, can shorten our lives by 7.5 years.
wow.
That it raises all kind of markers. It raises the markers for Alzheimer's. It raises blood pressure. Even just feeling that we're being judged. I mean, ageism is a complex subject because it isn't just about being nicer to old people.
Mm,
Ageism affects younger people as well. You can be considered too young for something,
yeah.
just as you can be considered too old. There's lots of derogatory, slightly derogatory remarks. Oh, you you're too young for that job, or oh, haven't you left home yet? And
Yeah,
those kinds of things make younger people feel that they're out of place as well. So,
yes,
but it is
goes
particularly
both.
damaging to older people when they begin to feel that they're not valued, that they're just a burden, and yeah. So the narrative needs to change, and it seems like an overwhelming task, but the World Health Organization is doing a great job, actually. And if you go to their website, they've done a global survey on ageism. And what they put up on their website makes it crystal clear. They talk about it very succinctly. They're carrying out a global campaign to change things, and people can join it. Community groups can join, and they can take things off the website to share amongst their members and so on. So there is this campaign going against it. I, in my small way, made little badges with Bloomer and Resist Ageism on them, which I hand out at every opportunity to
Yeah,
people.
amazing.
Just, it's a
Yeah,
nasty, it's
it's
a nasty
devastating.
thing.
It
It,
is. Yeah.
it's the only kind of, discrimination that is still
Acceptable.
widely okay and acceptable.
And it certainly is. I tried to get a birthday card for somebody the other day. It is so
Mm,
hard to find a birthday card that's not making some sort of like derogatory dig at somebody's age after
yeah,
40. All of the
yeah,
cards are, yeah, you know,
absolutely.
and yeah. So I
And
think,
we don't. The thing is that we don't. We denigrated ourselves. Like people say things like, "Oh, age is just a number," which really
mm,
annoys me
mm,
because it isn't just a number. It's like saying, "Oh, it doesn't count. It's nothing."
mm,
Um, when actually we should be celebrating, because to not reach a reasonable age is quite devastating. People that
yes,
die young, or they say, somebody's 80 years young, but it's kind of denying the value of those 80 years. We'll put a cake with 18 or 21 candles on, all blazing, and celebrate those young milestones,
yeah,
and name the number, 18, 21. You can buy
mm,
those cards in the card shop, you know.
yeah,
But at the other end of the scale, you can get cards with 80 and 90 and things on them, and even 100. But there tends to be that horrible jokey thing going on as well.
yes, yes. And you're right. It should be a badge of honor that you've
It
had,
should be.
a long, well-lived life.
Mm.
Yeah. What do you think about, cross-generation connections? I know this is becoming quite popular where they get sort of younger children to go and visit people in aged care facilities and things like that. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you think that is a powerful tool or not really? It's just a bit
I,
of service.
yeah, I think anything like that might be good to try. I think, what seems to be going on in this country, I don't know about other countries, but
Mm,
certainly here, is there's a kind of background buzz of intergenerational disconnection anxiety. Like my generation, um, the baby boomer generation are kind of finding themselves being blamed for everything from the cost of living to the impossible affordability of housing and all of these things. And there seems to me to be and also by the same token, my generation often blaming younger generations of being always glued to their phones and
yeah.
you know so it goes both ways, and for me it feels like a lack of understanding about what's actually formed our generations, what's formed the baby boom generation.
Hmm.
um, they were raised by a generation who were known as the silent generation. They
Yeah.
didn't tell us much. We had to figure a lot of things out for ourselves. When we were adolescents, when puberty struck, we were sort of furtively handed a booklet with information and left to get on with figuring it out for ourselves. Um, we had a fairly brutal education system by today's standards. We had corporal punishment. We sat in rows facing the front, in silence, and we had came out of all that with beautiful handwriting. But you know, that was that was it. I mean, by today's standards, when I go into schools now, primary schools, and see the way children are, it's so interactive, and they're all
Mm,
sitting. in groups and things, I just
Yeah.
think, my God, why didn't we have that? Why were we tortured in a way?
Yeah.
And so all of these things came to bear. Then we had the 1960s, like a huge social cultural revolution exploded. And of course, we embraced it. And some of us never got out of it. Some of us didn't even survive it. But what it made us do was want to raise children that were different to the people that raised us, and we wanted them to have choice. And so we raised a generation of millennials um,
Hmm.
who had, quite different values, and they get picked on for, how they are as well. And then the next generation, Generation Z, well, I love them. I think there's a lot of hope in that young generation. They're kind of reacting back in a way. They've never known life without the internet. They've always been digitally inclined, but they're seeking a bit more privacy, I think, than the millennials. And
Hmm.
so there needs to be understanding between the generations, what formed us, why we're like we are. I mean, millennials had to come of age during the global financial crisis. Generation Z had to do their final years of schooling during COVID.
Right.
There's a lot going on here
Mm.
socially,
Yeah.
and that needs to be understood. And then we'll feel more able to embrace each other, I think, in the way that we are. And
Yeah.
so I don't know. Yeah, a lot more talking needs to take place.
Yes, yes. I do love in the book when you mentioned that your generation is the first one going into like aged care facilities with smartphones. And I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, I think that's great personally that, it's easy to stay connected with people who are outside of the facility. And if there is any kind of abuse and things, I think it's just a bit more transparent. So,
yeah.
yes,
That's a hopeful thing.
I think, yeah,
Um, that's always assuming that we're allowed to use those smartphones and things, of
right,
course.
right.
You never know, do you? But we've got the knowledge and we've got the connectivity. So
And
yeah,
tools. Yeah.
we've got the tools.
Yeah. Was there anything that you were nervous to include in the book or anything that was particularly difficult for you to write about? Obviously, I know we spoke already about the death,
Mm,
passing of your mother because that was
yeah,
quite
that was
recent as well, as you
yeah,
mentioned.
that was
Yeah.
hard. Um, and I still yeah, I still find that hard. It's 4 years on, and I'm still trying to deal with it. I think grief is a very difficult subject.
Mm,
Takes everybody differently, and it doesn't really go away. You just have to learn to carry it in some
yeah.
ways. And I think this is what also we don't understand often about older people, and extremely old people, is that by the time they reach that age, they're actually carrying a lot of things that we can't see. They've lost a lot.
Hmm.
And like my mother was 95, and she was the last of her family, last of all her friends. And so there was a huge loneliness there, that we could not do anything about, even though we were around her and we had her with us, staying with us and things. Um, she still, there was still no one that had known her
Wait.
as a child, you know.
Yeah.
That's
Mhm.
what happens. And I think when you lose your mother too, there's that sense that there's no one now that knows how you were as a child.
Yeah. I think in the book you said you also kind of lose that buffer between yourself
Mm,
and death when you lose a parent or your mother
yeah,
in particular. And I think I loved that reflection. So yeah, it's something that we don't think about, but
we don't, and it's not necessarily true because sadly, children can sometimes die before their mothers.
yeah.
In my case, and that's terrible when I think
Mm,
when that happens. I think really terrible. But in my case, that didn't happen, and so yes, I did have that sense of a buffer,
mm,
and then that forces you to confront your mortality and
mhm.
how you feel about it, and sort of try to get your own house in order, I think.
Yeah.
So I wrote about death cleaning, and actually, I had made, after I'd cleaned, I'd dealt with my mother's belongings. Well, I still haven't totally dealt with them. I still have, unfortunately, things in the wardrobe that I can't part with. But I'm getting there.
Yeah.
I started to think about dealing with my own muddle, and
Mm,
somebody asked me. just after the book came out. How is the death cleaning going? How are you doing? And I said, oh my God, I was scared someone had asked me this because it all came to a halt because I had so much to do with the book. We had
Mm,
launches and I went to a few festivals and things.
yeah.
But now things are quietening down a little bit. I've gone back to it and I'm sort of allowing myself the rest of this year to try and sort out the
Mm,
house,
yeah. Yeah.
and get things in order, and then I'll feel more relaxed, I think.
Yeah, I think it's quite emotional as well when you're doing that. You're reliving lots of memories and you're being, reminded about a lot of
Yeah.
beautiful things and sad things. So yes, I think it's an emotional thing to do.
Mm.
Yeah, and can probably be a bit draining. I think there's also, I love the honesty that you write about when you talk about intimacy and later life. Um, and, society just does not talk about this, which is sad and problematic. Even women don't write about this in books. So I love that you're bringing this up, and hopefully that can become more common. We start to see more films and more books and stuff where it's around intimacy in later life, because as you pointed out, it does exist even in nursing homes. So,
Even in nursing homes, yeah,
mm,
it is kind of. I brought it up in the context of nursing homes because of really thinking about the rights of older people.
yeah,
What do they have rights? And somebody had written to me from Queensland to tell me the story of their relative who went into aged care and formed a close friendship with an elderly man who was in there. Um, and really, that it was the companionship, it was the closeness. They would sit together and have their breakfast or read the paper or do things. Um, but this was a few years ago, and the regime in the nursing home was really, strict, and they were. One of them, in the end, was moved to another nursing home, even though there was nothing at all going on there in that
yeah,
room. You know,
so
so
terrible.
it's terribly cruel, isn't it?
Mm,
And I remember the elderly man had been a prisoner of war of the Germans, and he said even the Germans had treated him better than this nursing home. So,
okay.
yeah, but of course, in a nursing home situation where some people have dementia and so on, there is always the question of consent.
Right.
It's a very knotty problem, actually. And I think every nursing home perhaps has to deal with it, um,
Yeah.
but they should be dealing with it in a compassionate way.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you shed some light on this, because I don't think it's something that people, younger people, even think about or realize could,
No,
potentially. Yeah. So
I
it's,
don't think they do. And no, there's a lot of distaste for uh,
mm,
older bodies, really. But older people often just feel like their young selves inside. They don't feel any different, but time has changed things. So,
yeah.
yeah, there are one or two novels that draw on this, and which there's that beautiful novel by Kent Haruf called Our Souls at Night. And I think it's just such a beautiful book. It illustrates how that need for closeness and companionship, especially at night when the world is dark,
Mm,
and how sometimes younger relatives can interfere or you know put pressure on to bring that to a close for not always the best of reasons, sometimes for their own self-interest. They're worried about what will happen if property, is
yeah.
settled. Yeah, and the
Yeah.
property and assets come into the whole question. But
Yeah.
mm,
Yeah. People start acting in the best interest of their loved ones then.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so you obviously did, a lot of research, because you talk about some very important issues like, the failing aged care system, homelessness, which was also eye-opening, and
Mm,
voluntary assisted dying.
yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about, how you found the right people to talk to on these topics? And yeah.
Well, the homelessness topic. Well, of course, it's coming up a lot that older women are amongst the fastest growing group of people who are becoming homeless in Australia. And um, I just took the bull by horns, really, and got in touch with a place here in Adelaide called Catherine House, which is an organisation which takes in women struggling with homelessness or and often, yeah, they come from all kinds of situations, but often from domestic violence situations, sometimes from prisons, sometimes from hospitals. I couldn't even imagine being discharged from hospital and having nowhere to go. I mean, no home to go to. It's just,
Yeah.
you know, and Catherine House, they're amazing. Like they social workers, people that work there, they accept people with absolutely no judgment about their situation. They just are there to help them and to raise them up into finding a better way forward. And so I got in touch with them, and one of their workers who's been there a very long time was kind enough to talk to me, spend an afternoon telling me about the various ways that older women end up in a homeless situation
Yeah.
and what they do to try to alleviate that. So yeah, it was really eye opening,
Yeah.
amazing. With the voluntary assisted dying, I had a friend, a dear friend, who took that route. She was terribly ill and wasn't going to get any better, and surprised me out of the blue by writing to me and telling me that South Australia had just passed the law for voluntary assisted dying, that she was going to apply for it. And
Mm.
basically, it was an email saying goodbye. It was very hard, and I struggled with it on lots of fronts. But I also was astounded by her courage
Yeah.
at doing it.
Mm.
And then to kind of understand it better, because I just I just thought this is something I don't think I could ever do, and I just don't know. I got in touch with somebody at SA Health who managed to look up. She was the lead pharmacist in South Australia who mixed up the medicine that goes to
Mm.
people that are taking this route, and she agreed to have a chat with me. And so she really demystified the process for me by taking me through the whole thing from
Yeah.
beginning to end. And I said to her at the end of that conversation that actually what she'd done for me was make me less afraid and make me
Yeah.
realize that if I was ever in that terrible situation where I had absolutely no hope
Mm.
of getting better and I didn't want to suffer anymore, that I felt that I could do that. I could go through
Yeah.
that. So information is power, knowledge is power. And I've always felt that. I think with some, if I'm really frightened of something, knowing what it consists of, knowing all about it can really help. And so that did help me with that whole situation of
Yeah.
the voluntary assisted dying.
Yeah. No, it was
Um,
great that you shared these things because, again, you're shedding light on things that are such powerful things to know about, but
mm.
not discussed enough.
They're
And
not talked about, and even in the health service sort of
mm,
holds back conversation about it. I mean, she had to get permission from the SA Health to talk to me.
yeah,
And then luckily, after by the time I'd written and then let her see it and agree and made changes that she wanted, by the time the book was coming out, she'd actually left that position, and she'd moved to one of the universities here, so she was in a position to be much more free about what she could talk to me about.
yeah.
So when we launched the book.
Mm.
Um, we had a whole series of events, and one of them was an afternoon in which we had a panel discussion about aging. It was called "We Need to Talk About Aging," and the this pharmacist, ex-pharmacist, was one of the people on the panel, and she was able to talk really freely at that
Candidly. Yeah.
stage without being censored by the health service
Yeah.
about the whole process. And I think it was really valuable to the people that were there.
Yeah. Oh,
Mm.
for sure. Also love the garden journal that you kind of weave in throughout the book. I just think it's so rich in, symbolism and um, I loved those little snippets. I have a few
Mm.
questions. Are you still keeping a gardening journal or have you stopped?
It lapsed for a bit because I was so busy with the book, but I've started again.
Mm,
um,
okay.
yeah, I've started again.
Start again. And what is it for you that you think, is so healing about gardening? What do you love the most about gardening? So-
I've written essays about gardening and the healing nature of it. I think it works on lots of different levels. There's the actual hands in the soil level, where it's been shown that there is bacteria in the soil that when our skin comes in contact with it, it there's a process by which it releases serotonin
Yeah.
in the brain and all these feel good hormones that are almost like a sort of mini antidepressant treatment. So there's that. But there's also the connection with the natural world. And one of the threads in an essay I've just written is about the whole concept of biophilia, which is the human need to connect with the natural world. And and there have been books written on this topic, and one of them, the most recent one, I think, said that there's a lot of unrecognized distress that takes place in human beings when they're denied contact. So you can imagine if we were just put in a cell and, with a concrete floor and concrete walls and
Mm,
things, and our interaction with the natural world is really limited. There is a lot of distress that
yeah.
takes place in the body
Mm,
from that. So I feel as if as we age, actually, it does us a lot of good to be in connection with the natural world. And a lot of times as we age, it's that time is being reduced because we're reducing our gardens, we're downsizing, but on the hopeful side, a lot of aged care homes have really quite good gardens. They design gardens with older people in mind so that beds are raised up to a higher level where if you're in a wheelchair, say, it'd be on a level where you could actually touch and they plant up with things that you can rub and sniff and
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, there's a good side to it as well
Mm,
for the aged care sector and gardening. But
yeah.
yeah, I think it's just an important part of life that we maybe don't give enough thought to.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, as we get older, we probably spend more time indoors as well. We're less active. So it's very good. How did you first discover gardening or where was the passion for gardening first sparked?
Well, look, I think I don't know, it can go right back. My grandfather was a veteran of the First World War,
Yeah.
and he was injured in France in the First World War, injuries that he carried for the rest of his life. But he was lucky enough to survive in France and come back to South Australia. And I remember him as a child walking around his garden in the mornings with a cup of tea, naming all the plants for me. The garden, I think, helped him heal. It gave him great pleasure.
Mm, sorry.
And so that might be where it was a bit of a gardener. So
Yes.
yeah, I just saw a little sign saying something about our internet connection. Are we okay?
Yeah, sorry, you did freeze for a second, but it's
Okay,
back. Yeah, you're
it's
back.
back. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think it starts in childhood. And then, I went through teenage years and things where I didn't care about gardens. Just didn't give them a second thought. 20s, nah, meh. But then, late 20s, early 30s, start homemaking, and then that's when the gardening sort of kicks in. You want to make things,
House proud, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
you want to do it all. So
Yeah.
kick back in.
Yeah. Actually, I was inspired. I did go to Bunnings and we bought a few like peace lilies and just more greenery inside the house. So we do have a garden outside, but I don't think we had enough inside, enough plants.
Mm.
Just yeah, I do think it's very calming. Um,
It is calming, yeah.
mm,
And there's lots of evidence. I don't know whether it's in the book, but I certainly talked about it in this gardening essay that patients who have plants or flowers in their hospital bedrooms Its study has shown that they heal quicker, they have need fewer pain medications, and they discharge sooner.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
having them in the house, I think, has got to be a good thing.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, and I wanted to just mention briefly, I think we spoke quickly offline, but you write about your cancer diagnosis in the book, very, very honestly. What I love is it, well, for me at least, it forced me to reflect on the value of what you say, like the ordinary days in life is, and how easy it is to forget that just the everyday is in fact a miracle. It was such a great reminder to read that. I think, as you know, we're increasingly on social media and comparing our lives to other people's curated online lives. It's hard. We see their travels and we see all the fabulous things that are happening. I think we take our ordinary days for granted. So I just loved that
Yeah,
sentiment. Yeah. So
it's
thank you.
it's really hard to remember. That's one of the things, and I think the reason why it's hard to remember is it's all to do with our relationship with time and the way that we have this mechanism in our brains that shields us from the knowledge of our mortality,
Hmm.
and so that we even, when you're quite old, you still tend to think of time as streaming on indefinitely. And so I've just been reading Joan Didion, and she was talking about how she squandered a lot of time because, of course, she still had all the afternoons in the world. That's how we feel, I think,
Yeah.
in our 20s anyway. Like
Yeah.
certainly 20s and 30s. Ah, there's all the afternoons in the world. Doesn't What if I have a hangover? So what? I'll just sleep all
Hmm.
day and sleep the day away.
Yeah.
Um, it is that mechanism to do with time and shielding ourselves from the knowledge that we don't have limitless time. And just trying to remember that, trying to hold on to it every day and go, like, everything is transient, everything is changing.
Hmm.
Um, if this is a beautiful afternoon and I'm sitting here and the sun's coming down and I've got a great cup of coffee and I've got a friend to talk to, this is just the best. This is just worth everything, you know
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
really appreciating it for what it is, I think.
Hmm. And I think it's good to be reminded. I think you're spot on that we
Mm.
we do not yeah, we do have that mechanism, so it is
Mm.
great. Um I'd love to just go back to the beginning a little bit and
Mm.
ask, when did you know that you wanted to be a writer? Was there a moment early on in your life, or did it kind of just sneak up on you?
I think it kind of snuck up on me. I was always writing, but never really thought of myself as doing anything. I left home quite young and had a few traumatic years, and I was living overseas, and so my first writing was always letters. I wrote, and I've got suitcases on them still because my mother saved them all for me, which is another whole story. But I was always writing journals. I was always writing letters home, and, and at a certain point, I thought, oh, I might start trying to write a novel. And then, because I used to love reading mysteries like Agatha Christie and things, I thought, oh, right, I'll write a kind of mystery novel. But
Okay.
as it turned out, I don't have the crime novel gene at all. I
Okay.
could never get the plots. I could
Right.
never get the plots right. So I had to wait quite a long time before I realized that maybe there was another kind of writing that I could do. And yeah, I also had cut my education off short. I left school at 16. And I always felt disadvantaged that I hadn't had a proper education. I always felt within myself lacking and not as smart as all the people around me and that kind of thing. And when I interviewed a lot of older women for Bloomer, and some of those interviews are at the back of the book, they're much shortened, unfortunately, because of the lack of space that I had for them in the end. But one of the themes that came out really clearly with older women, especially women who are a little bit older than me, even like in their 80s, was the difficulty that they had getting an education.
Yeah.
And it was a really familiar tale. One
Mm.
lovely woman who was in her early 80s told me that when she was in year 10, her stepfather said to her that if she wanted to carry on at school longer than year 10, she'd have to pay for it for herself. I mean,
Mm.
you,
Right.
I can't even imagine these
No,
days telling
we've
a
gone
child,
180 now. We want our kids to go to
we,
Harvard
we want them to go right through. You can
yeah,
imagine
yeah.
telling a child in year 10, you're going to have to
Gonna
pay
have
for
to
it
pay
yourself.
for it.
And she actually did. She managed to, but it's heartbreaking.
yeah.
It made me
She would
realize
have been an anomaly as well. I think that's
how hard
tough looking.
it was for women, and also in that our age group
Mm.
at school as girls, we weren't encouraged to think that we would achieve anything. We
Right.
were kind of guided towards a life of service,
Hmm.
of shorthand and typing and bookkeeping, and ultimately marriage,
Yeah.
and that was going to be it. So yeah, they were different types, and I think younger people don't necessarily understand this about
No,
their
certainly not.
parents and their
Yeah.
grandparents' generation, that it was a struggle to
Yeah.
even yeah get anywhere. So I didn't go into a university until I was well, must have been in my 50s, definitely late 50s. And then I sort of managed to go in, and I did everything all at once, and it was so exciting. It was just wonderful.
Yeah.
It was nerve-wracking because you had that inner doubt, like I've missed out on all this early stuff. Am I smart
Mm.
enough to do this? And then you find out that you are actually smart enough to do it, and that life experience actually does count for something.
Yeah.
So
Probably
yeah,
more than you thought. So was that an intrinsic motivation to go to university? Did anybody encourage you?
I think
Mhm.
just yeah, I was around a lot of people who'd been doing creative writing degrees,
Yeah.
and I had become very interested in writing at that point, and thought maybe that this was something that you'd be really valuable, or I'd learn how to actually write the way that I wanted to write and things. And so I tentatively, made an application, and I was lucky enough to get in on the strength of the writing that I provided them with. So yeah, and once I got in, then I was encouraged by tutors and other
Yeah.
people. So yeah.
Well done. I think your writing, well, definitely in Bloomer, it's gentle but it's piercing, and it has like a real strength behind it. But I think it's subtle and it's a great balance. I think. Would you say I haven't read your earlier work? Has your style changed, or has that always been your style?
Uh, I guess I don't know if it's changed. I think as you go on with writing, the more you write, I think you do, if you pay attention to style and that sort of thing, you do refine the way that you write, and hopefully it gets better. Hopefully it gets more accomplished. I do look back at earlier things that I've written and think, oh, I could change that now. So yeah, maybe it is kind
Yeah.
of improving, but
And are you a planner, or do you kind of just find the shape of a book as you go?
um, I think each book has. Um, I don't have any like one thing or the other. I
Yeah.
think each book has its own demands, and Bloomer had special demands. It was quite a different way of working. The book that I wrote before it was called The Tower, and that was a series of connected short stories, and that had particular demands. It was fiction for a start, and
Mm.
so you're inventing around a core of things which are there's always a thread of truth, I think, in what I write, and then even if it's fiction, I tend to invent around that. But it was the business of making sure that all the stories actually did connect, that there was a thread that was going through, that a reader was going to be able to find at the end and go like, yeah, that's what that was all about. Bloomer being non-fiction was quite a different matter. And the wrestling there was what to tell and what to not tell, and
Private.
in
Yeah.
what order. And actually, as I said at the start, I think creating a shape in non-fiction that
Mm.
a reader's going to open up. And so it follows the shape of a year, it follows the seasons through the year. And so I think that gives um, a kind of, yeah, solid
Goodness.
basis for a book.
Yeah. Did you find nonfiction, or do you find it like harder to write, easier, or just different?
Just different, I think.
Different.
I
Yeah.
actually, I actually love it. I love both forms, and
Mm.
that's why I say I've been going back to read quite a bit of Joan Didion recently, and I love both her fiction and her non-fiction, and the way she sort of swaps her thoughts sometimes travel between the two. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, do you struggle to let your work out in the world, or when it's finished, you can't wait to share it?
uh, it's always nerve-wracking, I think, handing over your work. And then I think with Bloomer, it was really exciting because a firm press who published it were really, they were really excited, and they were really putting in a lot of effort to make it a beautiful book, which,
Mm.
it is actually a beautiful thing in itself,
Mm.
the design and so on. And I also worked with an artist, Margaret Ambridge, who has done some incredible black and white charcoal drawings. They're so beautiful. They're like photographs, some of them.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of exciting to have that company while I was
Mm.
working, because often you're just working on your own, but suddenly I had someone I could ring up and talk through some ideas with and things. So it was lovely. It was a much less lonely prospect. But with a firm making this beautiful book and putting a lot of effort into it, it was quite exciting that it was coming out. Then you were always a bit braced for what the reviews would be, and try not to be depressed if somebody says something that you're not happy with. But that hasn't happened so far.
Amazing. Yeah. No, I think it's a really, I loved it. I've told so many people outside of the Connected Book Club.
Oh, that's good to
So
hear.
yeah, no,
Mm.
really resonated with me. Um, I was going to ask, when you are in the thick of writing your book, do you like to read other work, or do you just want to block out too many voices and just kind of stick to your book and writing and you're not reading so much?
I was reading a lot when I was writing Bloomer. There are a lot of literary references in it to other books,
Yeah.
and actually, just this morning, somebody told me that that's one of the things they like about it, because it's given them a whole sort of trail of other books that they can pick up
Inspiration.
on and read.
Yeah.
She said, "Oh, you've given me a whole year of reading at least here.
Yeah.
Track down all these books." Um, I was continually interested in what older women were writing and what was being written about older women. And so I was on the lookout all the time for books by and about older women, and just to see how we're portrayed in fiction and how we're portrayed in nonfiction. And um, that was one of the things that started me actually thinking about the whole prospect of writing Bloomer, was some realization one day that older women in fiction were only appearing as stereotypes. They were,
Yeah.
you know, just dreadfully underwritten. They were either demented, or they were interfering neighbours or mother-in-laws or something, or
Yeah.
faded beauties. And they,
Mm.
the kind of older women that I know in real life,
And nothing more.
who are vibrant and busy and managing complex families and
Yeah.
helping their younger, children into adult life and that sort of thing, plus looking after older parents usually. They were just completely missing. Where were
Yeah.
they? They weren't even there in fiction.
It is
So,
sad because they are completely overlooked, I think. Um,
mm,
and just even in general, it's, I think in society they're overlooked. And it is sad because as you said, they're the superheroes often that have so much to give, love and knowledge and wisdom and
mm.
patience. And so it is, a shame that they're overlooked, I think.
It
Um,
is, and I just wish that they could be more celebrated.
yeah.
And I think it's starting to turn. I do think the tide is starting to turn. I know that when I started growing the color out of my hair, and I went onto Instagram, and I found this whole community of women,
Mm,
older women, who were all growing color out of their hair and documenting the journey and all the rest of it. And I thought, this is amazing. This
yeah.
is like this is a tool that women can use to connect and encourage each other. And a lot of them would say that they were doing it in order to model it for their daughters because we never had it modeled for us. I think even when I started growing hair, color out of my hair, my mother, who was in her 90s then, I think,
Mm.
said to me, "Don't do it. You'll regret it." Like
Right.
they came, even though she herself had let hers go,
Yeah.
mainly because she said that they no longer made the color she liked. But
Right.
um, that generation, they stuck to the hair dye and they maintained the denial and
Yeah.
whatnot. So we didn't have that modeled for us at all. But I
Yeah.
think modeling it for the generations below us is incredibly important, and they
Yeah.
will deal with their aging better than we are and the generations before us did, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember my grandma would have been in her 80s and she would still put makeup on. I think that that generation also looked after themselves and proper hair when she would go out and very well dressed. My grandfather would always wear like a suit jacket and they dressed properly, I think.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and um, I think society these days is we're a lot more accepting of different appearances and stuff. So I think you're right. I think we will see that it is easier for people who are aging to embrace that. Um, and I would love to ask you, I have to ask you, if you could give your younger self some advice, and it doesn't have to be about writing, it can be about life or anything, what would you say to your younger self?
Oh gosh. Um, well, I think I'd say, for a start, don't worry, it's going to be all right. Because I was quite an anxious, hopeless, useless 20-year-old. I was very unformed and didn't know what I was doing. But I did a writing workshop with Natalie Goldberg last year. And Natalie Goldberg, kind of famous American creative writing teacher who wrote Writing Down the Bones, I think, was her most well-known writing book. And her practice is based on Zen meditation and so on. And she said she studied with a Zen master for 12 years. And after 12 years, she came away with three things. Um, and the first thing, they all apply to life as well as to writing. So the first thing was continue under all circumstances. And I think that's really important because, sometimes we just give up too
Hmm.
early. And the second thing was don't be tossed away. And that means don't let anybody tell you that you're not good enough or what you've done is not good enough, whatever. Just don't take any notice of that. Don't be tossed away. And the third thing was make a positive effort for good. And so that is like every day if I'm writing, like when I was writing Bloomer, for instance, I would say every day I have to do something to progress this,
Yeah.
a positive effort for good.
Good.
But that's about writing, but it could be about anything, just in
Yeah.
the day, make positive effort for good. Those are the three things. And I think Natalie summed them up really well. And I think I live by those as well.
Very eloquently too. I liked how you phrased all of those things. Thank you. That's great advice. Last question for you, because I know we've kept you for a little while. What are you working in anything next? Are you allowed to share with us what we can expect in future? Is there anything else?
I don't know. Like as I say, I'm spending the rest of this year mainly working on getting my life sorted out. Everything went on hold for quite a while. Bloomer took about 5 years all up
Right.
with the research and the writing. But I I've got a little inkling, something sort of nagging away,
Brewing away.
yeah, going away there. A couple of things, and And one of them is to do, I think, with this whole idea of transience and appreciating the moment and
Mm,
holding on to the moment and so on. I went to an art exhibition recently. Somebody just took me in there to get a cup of tea, and while I was there, I was looking around, and there was this bowl on a plinth, and it had all these bits of paper in it, and it was had a label on it, the bowl of poetic fortunes. So it was like a you could pluck a piece of paper out. It was like having a fortune cookie, but
mm.
without the cookie. And the piece of paper I took out said, "Everything is transient." And I put it in my handbag, and it just kept popping up every time I went to get my keys or something. It just kept popping up,
That's a
and
good reminder. Yeah.
it's like there's something here, there's something in this. I started
Yeah.
to think about all the things that lots of things have disappeared in my lifetime, and I know they've gone,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of things that are trembling on the edge. They haven't quite gone yet.
Mm,
All sorts of things like landlines, for instance.
yeah.
I've still got a landline, but.
Okay. Yeah.
So I don't know. It's really not really formed yet, but something
Something
along those
there.
lines. There's something
Yeah.
there to talk about, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Mm.
that's exciting. We will be following. So Carol, look, thank you so much for your time and just your openness with us today. Bloomer, I thought was just such a beautiful, thoughtful book. It stayed with me long after I finished reading it. I've told so many people to read it. I
That's
think it
lovely.
gave us, yeah, a lot to think about as we, continue to grow through our lives.
Mm.
So yeah, thank you. And it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you tonight.
No, thank you for inviting me. It's been lovely.
Thanks, Carol. And to everybody watching this, thank you for being part of the connected community. I will see you next month. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye.